Hello and welcome. This is the video explanation of the code for my final project, the tic-tac-toe game. Before I begin or get started too much more, I'd like to give a big shout out and a big thank you to Indie Development, who gave an online tutorial on how to do this tic-tac-toe game, step-by-step format. He was very helpful, so very big thank you to him. Alright, so getting started, we're going to first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the activity.main.xml, the graphical and the code view. The strings, I'm going to go over that. Main activity.java and the tic-tac-toe game.java. Over here we can see the list of those. We have two activity files, so there and there. Then we have the strings folder there and the activity main.xml there. So let's jump into the graphical layout of the activity main.xml. As you can see, we have our 9 playing buttons. This 1, 2, 3, the actual number on there will not be on there in the game running. You can see that in my final report. They'll be cleared immediately after the program is started, but just to keep and have an idea of what number was what, because over here you can see the names, the r.ids of these are named 1, 2, 3. So to keep them and make it easy to understand which one was which, these were put in there. Underneath those, we have our info. This is like giving you feedback, like it's your turn, or you won, or the computer won, or it was a tie, etc., etc. Down here we have our 3 counters. In between each one of these, so like right here, there's a box. This box has nothing in it, but immediately on startup, that box will be set to 0, and we'll see that later when we go into the main activity.java. And that's about it for the graphical layout. There's nothing beneath that, so if we go down here and scroll down, you can see there's nothing underneath that. That's all that's in there. If we'll go to the XML file, we can see that it's a linear layout, and then I use the table view to set up all the buttons. 3 different rows of table view, and it's just the buttons. Another table row, 3 more buttons. Another table row, 3 more buttons. And under that, we did another linear layout, if I'm not mistaken. Or did I do another table layout? I added a text view. That table row. Yeah, I did do another table row, and then I just put the 6 counters in there. Pretty simple stuff. Not hard to do at all. And the tutorial that Indie Development did, he actually did this graphically, which was real different for me because I'm used to doing all my programming in the activity.main or activity-main.xml. But it was fun to learn, very easy to do. So let's step over to the strings. We have a lot of strings for this one. The first one up top is @name. I don't actually think we use that, except that's actually used by the program at the top. Didn't use that one. Did not use that one. Alright, so now we get into the ones we're actually using. So this right here is an identifier. It just tells you go first. It goes in that info right there. So it goes in the info right here. It'll be placed in that later through code. This right here is telling you it's your turn. This right here is telling it's the computer's turn. This one you'll probably never see because the computer makes this move so fast that you just don't even see it. This one right here is going to the info box also when there's a tie. This one's the info box when you win, and this one's the info box when the computer wins. These right here are the ones that were used for the button. These here, they were the 1 through 9 that were placed on the buttons. This one right here is the info for the text view, the beginning text view before it's changed. This one right here is the human, ties, and com for the text views into those. And this other stuff I ended up not using, except for the exit game and new game, which they were used in the menu that we saw in the report. So let's jump over to the fun stuff. Main activity.java. So scroll back up here to the top. Now I'm kind of debating whether to do this first or the... I think I should actually do the tic-tac-toe game first, because this code references it a lot. They're actually very intertwined, which was really neat to set up. Really easy too. Let's go back up here to the top. This is the tic-tac-toe game.java. This right here is the actual brain of the program. So yeah, I'm going to run through this one first because I think it'll be better. So the first thing we do is we set up the board, and it's just an empty vector, I guess you could say, and then we give this board size 9, which is the 9 buttons that we have. Then we say our human player is X, our com player is O, and that empty is an empty space. We then set up a random also. This is just, that right there is just like it'll give it a random number from whatever you specify between two numbers. So this is the public static int get board size. First thing we do, we return board size, which is 9. We then go up here and we get this. We do the same thing. We say board character is equal to new character board size, which is 9. So it's saying that board is equal to 9, and then we say that we want to do for 0 to 9. We want to make all the boards empty space. So that basically, right off the bat, sets all of our board, the little buttons, to blank spaces. There's nothing in them. Then we say mran equals new random. So this is where we also do the same, pretty much the same thing again. But the reason we set this up here is that later we will call this when we need to for the main activity. You'll see that in just a little bit. This right here is the move for the human player. Basically what it does is that two variables are passed into this, a character player and an int local. So for that board, local, which will be a number from 1 to 9, it is going to equal player, character. And you'll see later in the main activity where we actually pass information into that. And all that's doing is saying that now the human player has played this piece and it cannot be played anymore. Alright, this is the brain for the computer. Pretty simple. It's 3 loops, if I'm not mistaken. 1, 2, 3, yes. 2 for loops and a do loop. So the first thing we do, let me get back down here to it, is we initialize this move variable. And then the first thing we want to do is check to see is there any move that the com player can do. And that's what this first for loop, is there any move that it can do to win. So the first thing we do is we say from board, as long as, well, right here, we say from 0, we do this from 0 to 9. And then we say that if the board spot does not have the human player played in it, and the board spot does not have the computer played in it, then go down here. We're going to say we're going to see if the board. We're going to set the variable to the com player. We're going to check to see if there's any spot open that, and that's what this little guy right here is doing. You'll see that in just a minute. We're going to check to see if there's any move it can make to win. And then if it returns, we're going to play there. And it's going to return I and set this to that I. Else, board is equal to I. Board I is equal to cur, which is up here. Basically, we're just passing that back so that when we move on to this loop, we're back where we started. So this one checks to see, well, is there any move I can do that will block the human player from winning? So the first thing it does the same thing. It just passes. This is just a passer here. And then we're saying that board I is equal to human. It's going to check for winner 2, which is checking to see if there's any moves that the human player can do to win. And then it's going to move the computer to there to block, turning that I value and playing it. And we're doing the pass again, by the way. And if neither one of those comes back, well, that means that that there must be nothing that it can do to either win or block. So it is just going to randomly select one of the squares and play it. And that is what that does. So we have that ran there. And it's going to pick a number between 0 and 9. 1 and 9, excuse me. It is 1 and 9. and then it's going to play it and move that to there. And I believe I misspoke earlier. That move statement, I was wrong. This move right here, that's where it's passing all of that stuff into. So it's just passing. That is just doing moves for players, and that is what's being called right here, and up in the first for loop right here. So that is that move function. That's what it's doing. So this is the check winner. This one's pretty intense. So we have to do quite a few different checks. We have to check for, if we go back to here, we have to check for wins here, 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 and then the crosses. And that's what check winner does. So when we first start off, the first thing we do is for I to from 0 to 6, and we increment by 3. And the reason we do that is that if I is equal to human player, I plus 1 is equal to human player, and I plus 2 is equal to human player, return 2. So that means the human 1. How you can see that is if we're at 0, so we put 0 in here for I, that's going to be 1, 2, and 3. So if all of those are the same, or equal to the human player, X, then we're going to return 2 because the human 1. And I can show you that here. So if 1, 2, and 3 are all equal to X, the human player 1, obviously. So we need to pass that back. Same thing, does the same thing except for com player, because that means computer 1. And then we're going to go down here and we're going to do the same thing again, except we're going to say from 0 to 2. So we got, if we put 0 in here, 0, 3, and 6, and then that is, go back up here to that, 0, or excuse me, yeah, we put 0, 1 in that variable. I think it was 1. Might have been. Okay. So 0, excuse me, yeah. Oh, yeah, because the vector is laid out from 0 to 8. I'm sorry. Or 0 to 9, excuse me. So 0, that'll be 0. I'm getting confused. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Yeah, I get it. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3 by that logic. So 0, 3, and 6. If they're the same, then that'll be it. And then when we put 1 in there, that's that. So 1, 4, and 7, which would be the next one, which can be seen here. So when we do that. Okay, yeah. Then we go through and with these 2 statements right here. So those take care of all the rows and columns that you can win. Then we just do a couple simple these 2 statements here, the 2 if statements, this one and this one. They basically check for the crosses, and it is just a simple and or statement. So and 1, 2, 3, or I'm sorry, 1, 5, and 9. Yeah, 1, 5, and 8 according to this actually. But anyway, or the other one, which was 2, 4, and 6. Same thing for the computer. And if none of that comes back, then it returns a good old 0 here, which means that the game had to result in a tie. Yep. Alright, excuse me. Returns a 1 for a tie. This right here. Oh, this right here, this for loop right here, checks to make sure that there is at least one spot available so that the game can continue. So For int equals 0, I is less than board size, which is 9, it checks. So if the board I does not equal human, and it does not equal com player, which means there's a spot left on the board that can be played, no winner has occurred, that means the game needs to continue. If all of this is false, all the way down to here, then it returns 1. That means that no spot is available to be played, no winner has occurred. So this is your tie number right here. So let's go over to the main activity now. You can see we set up a whole lot of variables, text views, counters. These are the counters for what I was talking about earlier. These are the counters for the humans, the ties, and the computer. The first big thing that I do want to recognize here is this is a way to call activities. So basically this private right here is saying that tic-tac-toe game, which is this guy right here, we're setting that whole thing to this variable. And later, like you would with these, like with a text view, where you like say this info, m.info.setText, well, you'll actually be able to call functions that way by saying like game.clear, which was our clear board function from that. So it's a really neat way and simple way to call functions from another activity in a separate activity. Then here we set up our button functions. So as you can see, button 0 through 8, and that's all 9 buttons. And then we got, I guess I can get in there. It's all our buttons, and that's right in the onCreate method, which is here. So onCreate, we're going to that. We're creating the activity.main. Then we're going in. The info equals text. We're finding all of our text views, and then we're setting the text to the integer from these here, like that text view, which was right there, is being set to the numbers from the counters, which is what we wanted to do. Then we're going to game equals new game dot new tic-tac-toe game. We're saying that is happening, and we're starting a game. So then we come down here, and this is options menu. That I will say, then you got to get the add overrides done first. These right here are the basically when you push the menu button on your phone, this comes up and inflates this. If we go to this menu file, it will inflate this. It will bring this up, and in that we have two different things: the r dot. Oh, come on. We have the r.newGame, r.id new game, and exit game, which just starts a new game and closes out the app. But here we get into the meat potatoes. So we have our start game. The first thing it does is it goes into tic-tac-toe game and runs the clear, which clears out all of our buttons. And then it goes through each button. It sets all of them to empty. It sets all of them enabled, and it puts an on-click listener on them, on all of them. So this right here, this next bit of code, is what we use to test, does the human go first or does the computer go first? So we have this boolean here that we set up earlier. We say that if m first is true, which up earlier we said that m first was true, so the human gets to go first on the first game. We say that we set the m.info to say it's your turn, or actually this one is you go first, and then m first equals false, so that the next time this runs through, this will be false. It'll hit the else statement, go through and switch. And then this right here is for m game over equals false. The reason you have to put that in there is later, when we hit this, these are the on-click listeners. If any of these occur after you hit a button, the game's going to end. As you can see here, right down here, MGE equals true, MGE equals true, MGE equals true. That's game over. Game end, actually. So these first couple, let's go into this now. This is the on-click listeners. So you set up the on-click listeners as its own class. You give it a local, and then you basically just tell it that you're basically telling the class what this is in this little public, right here, and we're going to, it doesn't return anything, it's just setting up a variable. Then we say public void on-click view. So this is setting up the on-click listeners for each of the buttons. If MGE is not false, or it is false, then this is true. So it'll let us run. And then down here, when we set that to true, then not true is false, which is what that is saying. So it won't work anymore. None of the buttons will work after that. Any of the subroutines that allow that in the game in this will not allow it to run anymore, which is exactly what we want. So the first thing we do is that we set up the button. If the button is enabled and it is pushed and pushed by the human player, it ints win, and it starts the check for winner. So the first one is not going to return a response, and that's where we hit here, and that's returning 0. So when 0 is returned, that means that there's still buttons to be played, and the computer needs to do a move now. So the first thing it does is it sets the text to the computer's turn, and then it ints the variable move to the computer move, and then it sets that move to move and move. And that set move is a routine that is later in this program, and it uses the computer set routine. It seems a little backwards, I know, but it's just how you have to do it. It's basically passing the same information, everything, and then it sets win to game equal check for winner. And then it'll run through that a few times. Well, actually, you do it again, and then if it'll say it's your turn, and then you go again, and then it'll run through this, and it'll keep looping through this, and it'll stay in this until we hit a final winner. So 1. If it ever returns a 1, that means there were no buttons left over, and we have to, it was a tie. We increment the tie counter, and then we set the tie to, so we set the counter to that integer, and we say the MGE is true, and you have to do a new game. 2, human 1. Increase the human counter. We then set the text view to that counter, and we say the MGE is true, game's over. Else, the computer 1, we increase its counter, and we do that. Same thing. This is the set move that we were calling earlier. It is the exact same one it is almost set up exactly like the other one, placing the character and local. We then say that game.move, which is the move from earlier, is player and local. We then say that the button that was pressed is now false, so it can't be pressed again. And then we say that button is set to the value of the player, which is setting the human X or the computer O. Then here, this is pretty cool. We set if player is equal to game.humanPlayer, which is the X value, we're going to set that text color green, and else we're going to set that text color red because it's a computer. And that's about it. It's pretty simple to make. It took about maybe a day to get everything set up and test it, and go and figure out some of the errors I had in my code. There was a couple errors I made, just stupid things, like I accidentally put a 1 instead of an I for one of the for loops, so that kind of screwed everything up. But yeah, it was pretty fun to make, pretty simple. Was very informative. I didn't know that you could just call activities from another activity, or call, I guess, routines from another activity by just declaring it like that. So yeah, fun project. See you later, Steve.